If you spent any time in like Dungeon Master writing circles or talking to other Dungeon Masters about how to make good campaigns and good stories, you have probably heard someone say the big bad evil guy. This is like the main villain of the story, and there is tons of content dedicated on how to make great big bad evil guys, right? Like how to make good villains, how to make them enticing for the players and ruthless and villainous. But I don't see a lot of people talking about the mid-level bads, right? The medium bad evil guy, if you will, the MBEG. But when we look at a lot of fiction and when we look at a lot of Dungeons and Dragons modules and campaigns and what has been successful in the past, we see a lot of attention on mid-level bads. The sort of lieutenants of the villain, right? And when I'm talking about a villain's mid-level bad or a villain's lieutenant, I'm basically talking about the mid-level managers of the villain's organizational structure, right? Like at the bottom we have minions, the henchmen, these are the cannon fodder that your players will be fighting, and then we have the lieutenants, and sometimes, but often not, we have generals. These two kind of get intermixed. And then we have the villain themselves, right? And lieutenants and generals and the villain and the henchmen and things, they are often untitled in storytelling. But this is a good way to think about a storytelling structure when we're going to have a small group of wily individuals cut through its ranks to defeat our big bad, right? And the heroes are going to be spending a ton of time with these guys. So we need to think about how we want them to be written and what we want them to do in our world and what kind of character we want them to be. And I might even argue that a villain's lieutenants are more important than the villain themselves because it is first impressions, right? First impressions are important in fiction, and they're very important in a game where you want to get the players involved, to entice the players to fight against this organizational structure. And it really shows a lot about who the main villain is by proxy and shows what your villain allows to happen in their organization, or it can show cracks in their authority, right? And so there's a lot you can say through a good lieutenant, like storytelling wise. They offer a lot to the storytelling meta, if you will. And it's easy to say like, oh, just go write good lieutenants and then your players will be interested, or like, remember your mini bosses. But people spend so much time on getting that main villain just right. But your players are going to be interacting with these agents of your villain's empire a lot, right? So we should spend as much time on them. Oftentimes when I hear people talk about their favorite villains, they don't talk about the big bads of the world, right? They talk about these mid-level managers of this larger organizational structure, right? Like Darth Vader is a mid-level manager. Conquest is a mid-level manager, right? Like the Mountain, the Witch King of Angmar, like these are all dudes working for more evil dudes. If any of these guys bite the dust, it's just going to open up a small gap in a otherwise fairly impenetrable wall that is the villain's fortress. And if the heroes don't take advantage of that, that gap is probably going to close. Those villains' lieutenants are going to be replaced. But the main characters spend tons of time fighting them, rallying against them to open up that gap in the villain's structure, his metaphorical structure, right? Because they are the hands of the villain in the world. They are a sensible way to get your players' attention, warn them of your villain's capabilities, and even show why your villain is the villain, right? I mentioned earlier, like, this is what your villain allows to happen in the world. He is the instructor of the ruthlessness of these characters. And so we're going to be saying a lot about the villain through these characters. Sometimes more than the villain has to say about themselves when the heroes finally see the villain, right? I think about like Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine. There is tons of content about Darth Vader and what he does in the world and like what sort of evil things he has done. And Palpatine like is just kind of pulling strings. There's not so much content about Palpatine. Not that I'm huge into Star Wars content. Maybe this isn't right. But that's just what I've noticed through what I have, consumed. But Darth Vader says way more about the Empire itself than Palpatine ever could. even though he is just a mid-level manager, in a way. I know he's more important than that. Please don't get on me, Star Wars fans. And so it's not really enough if they're just like doing the villain's bidding, right? Like doing the villain's bidding with no motivation or no reason to do the villain's bidding isn't a character, right? That's not really a example of a person. I think that these these mid-level manager types, they need goals, they need motivations, just like any character needs goals and motivations. But oftentimes they're a little bit easier to write for us because archetypes in the mid-level manager position are often reused and often go unnoticed. When I see like D&D videos on how to write good villains, a lot of them just look to a very ruthless character, one of those characters who just enjoys making people suffer, and they're like, yes, this is the epitome of evil, make your villain like this, and the players will think that they're evil. And that's how a lot of the archetypes of these lieutenants are. They kind of go unnoticed because they are synonymous with, evil as we see it in our culture. But the thing that, for me, takes these characters from just someone that gets the players involved, someone that the players can fight against, into a role where they are more of a character and they are more fun to interact with in a story, is to just give them motivations behind what they're doing, right? Like the reasonings behind their instinct. I feel like that really enhances a character. And I'll give you an example. We're going to talk about Conquest. There aren't going to be huge spoilers, but we are going to talk about 2 monologues he gives. One that appears in both the show and comics with a few edits, and one that appears in just the show. But both of them hit pretty hard, so if you haven't seen the show or read the comic, you can skip to this time code. It'll be near the end, but there's a pretty good summary there. So the first monologue I want to talk about is this monologue. I'll play it right now. Except, oh, would you look at that? It's me after having to deal with YouTube's copyright claim system. So can't really show the clip without getting a copyright claim, but I rewrote this section and it works a little bit better with me kind of walking through the monologue as far as understanding what Conquest is saying goes. So I think this is actually to our benefit. Now, in the first monologue, he thanks Mark in this kind of twisted way. Typically, he is told to restrain himself by the Viltrumite Empire. But for Earth, he has essentially been like let off his leash, right? And so he thanks Mark for angering the Viltrumite Empire to the point that they would send him and let him do as he pleases, right? This is an empire that is taking over solar systems, if not the whole galaxy, if I remember right. And they are ruthless and violent, and they are pulling him back from enacting violence on people, right? This is how evil this dude is that the giant evil empire has to stop him from being more evil than they want him to be. And he describes this allowance of violence as bringing him, quote, immense joy, right? Immense joy. He describes this allowance of violence as, quote, bringing him immense joy. He genuinely enjoys this. And this is relatively this is a relatively typical archetype of this mid-level bad, this evil character that just enjoys being evil. Like it's this raw evil that we see from those that just enjoy making others suffer. But I'll let Wes Prime finish this section, which tells you a lot about what that character wants, what type of person that character is. He enjoys uninhibited destruction, right? This is the epitome of evil that I talked about earlier. This is evil as we understand it in our culture, the selfish enacting of suffering on these innocent individuals, these innocent worlds. And you notice he says, usually there are so many mission parameters with disdain, right? It is only in destruction that he feels anything positive. And when he is limited in that destruction, it reduces whatever twisted emotion that he recognizes as joy in himself. And this is a great lieutenant, right? He gets the reader's attention. He is that warning, and he allows us a viewpoint into the ruthlessness of the Viltrumite Empire. It is the development of a system of maybe not oppression. Yes, it is. It is the development of a system of oppression within that story, a system of destruction within that story, and he isn't the main villain, right? And I mean that's not a spoiler. Obviously, he is working for the Viltrumite Empire. He is the lieutenant of the Viltrumite Empire. He is the mid-level bad of the Viltrumite Empire. And he says a lot about the Viltrumite Empire. But in the show, they added one more thing, which is interesting because Robert Kirkman, the author of the comic book, wrote this episode that Conquest appears in. He intentionally embellished the character. Here is Conquest's second monologue, once again, while he has the upper hand. Hey, it's me again, no surprise there. In Conquest's second monologue, once again, while he has the upper hand, he has the upper hand both times, and believing that he will win the fight, that he will end Mark's life, he reveals that his motivation for this destruction, that was once an apparent duty, is now only to forward the suffering he feels within the Viltrumite Empire. I think that's something you typically see in a lot of bad guys, is this just like forwarding of whatever suffering they are feeling. He describes himself as intensely lonely, wanting to weep, but unable because no one would care. He also describes himself as a victim of his own, quote, success that has driven him to such terrible lengths of violence that he no longer really finds any positive emotions outside of it. Right? He sees violence as the only thing he is good at. And we are moving in this second monologue, we are moving away from just a want, the previous want, which was just enacting violence on others, to a motivation, as I am actually about to say. And comic book fans were really excited to see Conquest. There was a lot of talk about Conquest appearing in the show before the show even aired, right? Like everybody was anticipating his arrival. And when this monologue happened, from what I could tell, from what I have seen online, everybody loved it because it took Conquest's wants and it gave him motivation, right? It is the reasoning behind his instincts of destruction and turmoil. He is no longer simply a cog in the empire. He is a man shaped by that empire. He's suffering from that empire who takes his suffering out on worlds. And all of this gives us a ton of information about the Viltrumite Empire, right? Their ruthlessness, their indifference towards the sufferings of their own people. It builds suspense. It builds anticipation for the dangers of the empire itself. Conquest is a tool to express the characteristics of the wider organization of villainy, at least in the context of this storytelling meta that we're talking about. And of course, there's other reasons he's there, right? There's other storytelling reasons he's there. But these are the benefits we get from a strong lieutenant with motivation. So if we want to build that suspense, build that anticipation for whatever big, bad, evil guy we have, it helps us immensely to spend some time on these mid-level bads by allowing these lieutenant-type characters to have goals, to have motivations, to be full characters that are interacting with the players, being ruthless and villainous towards the players. And they allow us to express the characteristics of our villains, right? To show our villains' influence on others. And you get to have fun with them. Like, lieutenants are kind of like villains with safety nets. They are super fun to play, super fun to create. They get a lot more interaction with the players, so spending more time on them will be more fun for you as a dungeon master, be more fun for your players as players. All minions and no mini boss make Jack a dull boy. And if you want to help me fight against the mid-level bad that is the YouTube algorithm, you can like or comment or subscribe. Do all those things you hear at the end of every YouTube video. My name is Wes, my own little lieutenant here. His name is Prismo, and this is Tabletop Writer, where I look at the narrative side of tabletop gaming. So if that's something that sounds fun for you, that you want to be a part of, Stick around. I'll be doing more content. Thank you again for watching. See you next time. From a strong lieutenant with motivation.